Welcome back to The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Calistro Faria. Joining me on the program now is Mr. Frank Redhead. He is the General Manager of the Grenada Ports Authority. He's joining me to talk about, with the hurricane season upon us, to talk about safety of ships. Grenada berthing, a popular berthing area for lots of yachts during the season. So we're going to be talking about what systems are in place for that and just general education and awareness about safety at sea given this particular season that's upon us right now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kalishran, and certainly good day to all your listening visitors. Sorry, your listeners. Yeah.
And it is good to have you on. So hurricane season, always a dangerous time for us here in the Caribbean. You do not know when a category 4 or 5 storm would hit. I mean, even a category 2 or 3 storm, it can be
Yeah.
dangerous for marine. What is happening at this time with you and your team? How do you prepare for the hurricane season?
Well, given the critical nature of ports to everything, um, given the forecast for this year where we have, based on what you believe, 17 to 25 predicted storms and 8 to 13 being likely to be hurricanes, I think it has assumed new importance in terms of our preparation for this this year's hurricane season. So basically, what we have been doing at the Port Authority is reviewing our processes, reviewing our SOPs, and looking to see where we have gaps in terms of resourcing and generally prepping. And that's the best you can do in the context. You do some preps. Hopefully, you prep for the worst, expect that the worst don't happen, and then you move forward from there in terms of how you manage. Yeah.
Yeah, prep for the worst and hope for the best.
Yes. Mm.
Right. And so in terms of gaps, what do you have any catching up to do, any gaps to fill? How
Well,
ready is the Grenada Port
well,
Authority for any
well,
eventuality?
we are ready to the extent that what we likely to anticipate in terms of a storm or a hurricane impacting Grenada. There is not much you can do beyond doing some preparations. For example, having equipment, having some level of redundancy that that would allow you to operate after a storm hits. But then again, things are best guess. You know, the risk is so ill defined. We know that the risk exists, but it's an ill defined risk. And even if you prep, I think the actual event will determine how you action on the ground as you move forward. So, in terms of resourcing, in terms of ensuring that we have equipment, we are sorting these issues out, um, particularly for the security component as well, in terms of how do we operate on the ground after a storm has struck Grenada, um, and how do we survive initially before actual aid comes in to give us an assist.
What about ships berthed and scheduled to leave port and ships approaching during an
Okay.
event?
Well, ships are generally safe. I think inherent in any shipping operation has to be the aspect of safety. What generally the practice has been historically this time of the year that all yachties tend to move south, looking for cover. So it's either Grenada, Trinidad, or even Venezuela. And the fact that most of the insurance companies now don't offer coverage for these yachties, then they're looking for safe harbors, Grenada being one of those. So I imagine all of the shipping, the dockyards that we have where we have 11 dockyards and yacht marine. Certainly we're going through their gears in terms of, scheduling and doing the various things that are necessary to support the yachties and other persons moving south in that regard. But generally shipping is safe in the context of how it operates. It's just trying to weave through any possibility of disaster or a storm that is likely to occur and keeping information rolling and ensuring that everybody's up to speed with knowledge of what is happening as it unfolds.
And so it's more important for you of how what you do if there's an event, if a storm hits and interferes with your assets, there's damage to your assets
Yeah.
at the port, how soon you can open up How do you manage things? People being
Yeah.
able to go in and out of the port at will because there's damage, the
Yeah.
facility is damaged. It would be a bit of a problem for you. So you're
Yeah.
looking at all of that as well. What does your standard operating procedures, your SOPs, what do they say? Run us through that, if this information that we can have.
Well, without being too specific, the we have a business continuity plan, so we know which systems we're going to bring online first. Should we be affected by a storm? Of course, all of this is driven by the nature of what happens. From my previous background, which is in the military, we have a saying that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So you can plan and plan, but when that contact is made, you have to reevaluate what you're doing. Obviously, getting the key ready to receive cargo and to receive possible aid will be primary among our various types of operations or actions that we have to take on board. So ensuring that vessels don't sink alongside, ensuring that vessels can dock alongside is one of the key aspects of what we have to ensure that will happen after a strike of a significant hurricane. But generally, the port has handled these things well. The protocol in terms of how do we secure containers and equipment on the dock. As you would know that we store containers, some of them are empty, and they become huge sails in a storm.
Mhm.
So it's dropping containers, buttoning down things and ensuring that we secure critical equipment as best as we can so that it gives us the flexibility to operate post an event.
During Ivan, I saw an entire roof of a two-story house that must have been maybe a
Yeah,
five-bedroom house or so, a huge building. The entire roof came off and sailed away. I saw this. So I'm thinking you're talking about empty containers, which might be maybe slightly heavier than that, but not by much or so. How do
yeah.
you secure that? How do you secure your empty containers at the ports should an
Well,
event be
generally,
approaching?
the procedure is that we try to drop them down to the lower level so that we don't create an opportunity for wind to lift them. So normally in routine operations, we stack containers about seven or eight high. I think we go at seven now for safety reasons. But if we anticipate a storm, we're going to likely drop all of those things flat on the ground, so it does not present an opportunity for them to become sails or to damage, become flying object that damage buildings and other things like that. Yeah,
But I'm thinking still, what I saw in Ivan makes me wonder.
yeah,
Would this is what is recommended, that once it's flat, it can no longer be a
yeah,
danger.
yeah. But the thing about these things, Kalisha, is that you can't plan for every eventuality. Um, you shoot for some basic things that you can do that's within your control. The other things that you pray that it doesn't happen. But certainly in the context of how port operations are executed, um, you look to minimize potential damage. And that's the best you can do in some realities. There's nothing much else you can do but reduce the potential risk, knowing that a risk exists that you cannot control everything that are there because there are known unknowns that you can't control.
And now, what about security? Because you're thinking during I recall after Ivan as well, my measure for everything. I miss Janet, of course. That security became an issue in the country, and I know that we have learned a lot of lessons, and a lot has changed since 2004 in terms of securing the port facility. Um, you have special procedures that are specific to an
Yeah.
event such as a hurricane. Do you?
But we have embedded security, which is an element of the RGPF operations. If we do get a strike, I think within the context of national security and how you can protect a critical asset, a determination will be made as to whether or not more resources are put into this to safeguard it or not. But we feel pretty confident with the embedded security that we have now to protect the infrastructure. Of course, if our assumptions pan out to be incorrect, then obviously a judgment has to be made at the national level as to how that is actualized.
Mm. And so you're saying that so your readiness now has also is pegged to international standards, yes?
Well, we're shooting for international standards in terms of safety and security. But again, given more context and given the finite resourcing nature of Grenada, you would not get all that you want to do. Um, so the idea is to shoot for some minimum standards um, with respect to how we incorporate these planning assumptions relative to the potential for a hurricane or storm strike, as well as other realities that may come down the pike. Because we recall that we don't only have a risk of significant weather events, we have a risk also of earthquake seismic events as well. So all of these realities has to be factored in terms of how do you plan and prepare. Where do you shift that needle with respect to preparation for hurricanes or seismic events, and what are the allowable resources that you have to spend with respect to underpin that plan and to ensure that it's effective.
And are you satisfied that you have the resources that you need for
Well, we
all, any
we
and all
you're never
events?
satisfied from a planning perspective in terms of resourcing, but I think, as I already articulated, shooting for minimum standards is a good benchmark to ensure that we have some capability to operate within the near 72 hour time frame, and obviously, should something rather dramatic happens, the regional mechanism in terms of support, as well as regional partners and international partners will come into play. That will certainly give us an assist in terms of reopening and allowing us to operate. But I'm fairly confident that we have the systems in place to recover rather quickly, within 24 hours, I would imagine, save and except that we don't have a significant event where a vessel sinks alongside. And that would be truly, truly traumatic in terms of the operations at the port. Because we have no other port that is capable of accepting, larger vessels, and certainly larger vessels are the main means of bringing in, equipment and aid post a hurricane strike.
So
So
knowing,
fingers crossed, pray to God that we don't get struck by a significant event. But certainly, in terms of the fundamental things that we need to do in terms of systems and processes, I'm pretty much confident that we have that covered.
and so, for instance, a vessel sinking alongside that can interrupt and disrupt the any sort of berthing after an event. How do you avoid that? Is it a situation where if you have an event,
But,
Grenada ends up in the path of a storm or a hurricane, that you don't allow vessels
but
to berth on the side,
yeah,
or
well, that's a very interesting question in the context that the harbor here, given the closed nature of it, is always deemed to be a protected harbor. But given the fact that we are having stronger events, we have to evaluate very carefully based on forecasts. What do we do? Should we leave vessels alongside, or should we send them out into the stream to anchor? If we suspect or have information to believe that we have a significant um, storm that will affect Grenada, I think we'll be more inclined to allow vessels to anchor into the stream that is out at the cruise port, in that area out there, as opposed to having them alongside. Because we really have to protect the key in terms of what happens after. And certainly having a vessel sink alongside the key is not something that we want to happen.
and in this, is there anything that the public, that you as the general manager of the port, in terms of creating awareness, would say to the public? We're in the midst of a hurricane season that the public would need to know, port to public.
Well, not especially directed towards hurricanes, because, like I said before, it's a risk, but it's an ill-defined risk in the context until when it happens.
Mm.
What we like to make the public aware of is that we are preparing for the hurricane season, and if and do we do get a strike, um, you have to give primacy to things that are more strategic to the country as opposed to personal items. So the fact that we hope, like I said before, that we don't get a strike, or we don't get a landfall, certainly for any Caribbean nation or any Caribbean territory. But if we do, we have to make some very strategic decisions as what comes out first and what goes second in terms of prioritization. And largely, when we make those decisions, it will be issues of strategic nature for the country. What impacts us the most in terms of relief, as opposed to to personal items that will be given the priority.
So medicine, water, food,
Medicine, water,
you
things of that
know,
nature, food, as
things for
opposed to
temporary
things like that
shelter if
nature.
we need
And
that, and so on.
yeah, and again, try to minimize the stampede that people will want to come down to the port. Should something happen, Granny send a barrel from overseas, or somebody send something from where. And again, try not to make life difficult for us in the context that we're trying to manage a difficult situation, and we're looking at things that will give the biggest bang to Grenada initially, and then we'll treat with the more minor issues down the road as they come up.
Because you might have that barrel on the port, and then there's a hurricane and the shops
Yeah,
are down, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
I need my barrel, and you're at the gate making
yeah, yeah,
noise because
yeah.
your food is in a shed inside there, and that would
Yes,
not be the time to be doing
that
that
will
in
not be the
some.
time to,
Yeah,
to, to
that
look
would
at
not
that.
be the
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
Now, you mentioned the cruise port a while ago, which brought to mind there was an incident a few days ago, not related to any natural disaster, but probably related to human error and human stupidity, more like it, that a
Yep.
small vessel crashed into the jetty, that people are still persisting in passing under the jetty because
Yep.
it's just
Uh,
easier than going the long way around. It's about half a mile out that you have to go
well,
or so to get there.
and
How are
again,
we dealing
Kalisha,
with that?
a lot of this has to do with a lack of intelligence and really common sense from a lot of the small boat operators. Passing under the jetty at the cruise port is prohibited. There's a sign there that said this is a prohibited area. And people don't realize the danger of this. You could be going through there and a sudden swell hits the boat and you lose your head. As it turned out, in a situation we don't know yet, the police is investigating this. Happened 2 days ago, where a vessel or boat crashed into the dock. So again, we are encouraging persons not to do this. It's illegal to do so. It's prohibited to do so. It is dangerous to do so for your own safety and others who may be in the boat at the same time with you.
And but the only way around it for people, I mean,
Mhm.
people always take the path of least
Yeah.
resistance. It's human nature. And in order to get from the northern end to the southern end of that piece of coast there, with Tonga St. George, you have to go out around the cruise jetty. So how do you? I mean, it's there,
Well,
it's available.
the
You don't have security there all the time. How do you stop it? How do you stop people
well,
from
the
just?
short answer to that, Kalistra, is what do you value most? Is it your life or time? You want to
Mm.
save time by putting yourself at risk and cause untold harm to yourself, then that's your choice. But certainly, I will err on the side of life and do what is proper and fitting, and don't violate the procedure that is laid down there, with respect to safeguarding yourself as well as a critical asset for the state.
And I understand this violation also occurs even when we have cruise ships in port.
Who ships in? People want to.
Are they also
Yeah,
risking
exactly.
our
Yeah.
our international accreditation as an international shipping
Well,
port, as
for
an
all of those
international
matters,
port?
Kalistra, I mean, it's just, I mean, things are happening, Grena, seem not to happen elsewhere. I mean, sad to say. But certainly, the critical nature of this, given the fact that it is a serious safety issue, a serious safety breach, again, should not happen. Trying to, and so persons with at high speed, I mean, you know, at high speed, run right through the bottom of the jetty at high speeds. Um, so that is reality. But again, that mindset has to change, given the fact that it presents a clear and present danger to persons who do it, and including the loss of life, up to including the loss of life.
And so if that happens, if there's God forbid, an accident with someone doing that during the cruise season, also has the potential to interrupt the,
Yes, yeah.
even if it's just for that day, the
Mhm.
cruise operations of that day. It also has that
Yeah, it will,
economic
because if you,
implications as well.
yeah, if you have a fatality, as a on the account of someone doing something, utterly foolish, um, the processes will kick in. So the investigation, cordons, and everything like that. And of course, that will disrupt operations there. It would not be a pleasant experience for visitors as well, in the context of what has happened there. They came for fun and sun, and they're certainly stuck with the possibility of being kept on board because of the fact that the local authorities have to investigate an accident, a preventable accident that should not have happened.
And apart from alerting people, warning people of the dangers and that it's a prohibited action that can land them in trouble, apart from that, are you taking any active measures to sort of
Well, we are
police the area?
considering, yeah, we are considering doing something, but given the nature of the marine environment, um, we have to be careful as to what we put there, and the sustainability of it. So we don't just want to do something that works for 2 months, but having a sustainable solution to prevent persons from getting under there. We have to have the area access open for routine maintenance. So it's not a thing that we can totally close off, but it is not something that person can use for free passage and to just frolic and have fun, given the fact that that there's a space available, that vessels can pass through, and use. But certainly the signs are there that says it's prohibited, it should not happen, and we are looking for a more sustainable long-term solution to prevent this from happening.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me on The Narrative, Frank
Yeah.
Redhead, General Manager of the Grenada Ports Authority. And good luck with everything that you need to get done for the hurricane season. Fingers crossed we won't get hit by any sort of event. And hopefully the people
Well,
who
thank
are
you,
affected.
Kalishran, and have a pleasant rest of the day. All the
All right.
best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye. This is The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Farris, speaking there with Frank Redhead, who is the General Manager of the Grenada Ports Authority, about preparations and how ready the Grenada ports are for any sort of natural disaster, any event. We're in the hurricane season, and forecasters are predicting an above average season with many strong storms, about 17 or so very strong systems expected to come through the Caribbean. Grenada just slightly in and out of the hurricane belt, so we're considered a zone of shelter. However, Hurricane Ivan did remind us that we're not always that safe. More when we come back.